Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel's Reverse Flash God. Chapter 21. 3 Curved Wing Building. The target escaped, but we still have a chance to catch him. Alexander Speer hung up the secret communication from Europe. What he had on standby was a SHIELD team loyal to him. In other words, he was loyal to the one he was trying to stop with Hydra's back. We cannot afford to lose the Ark. The Stark family has been saving this cake for too long. I know, so I need an ally who can stand up to him, but now he's gone, but it's not clueless. Alexander Speer took a sip of coffee, with a serious look on his face that proved that he was in a bad mood at the moment. Facing accountability from the same camp or organizations at the same level, Alexander Speer is now very angry, but he must control the overall situation. The Ark is only a small part of the technology needed by Hydra, and using the Ark to pry open Tony's Tucker, the weak point within SHIELD, is their plan. The previous generation of the Stark family established SHIELD, just like his children. It is a pity that now his eldest son has reached out to his youngest son. Perhaps Howard Stark knew what he was doing at the time. Act remorseful. Indifferent, maybe not. Do you have any clues? Ivan Vanki has been hiding for more than 20 years. It will be very difficult for us to find him. But we don't need to find him at all. Look here. Pierce threw out a thermal imaging record. The original image of the smokescreen was covered by a purple medium color temperature area, and after deleting the ballistic trajectory and the images of the assault team personnel, an obvious outline of a running humanoid appeared. It's 2 people and there's an electric arc. Think about it, who else in this world would have such a thing? Alexander Speer turned on the TV, and the news was playing the sharp comments of Mr. James, the editor-in-chief of the Hot Horn Daily. The Daily Bugle is the most famous news group in New York City, and their editor-in-chief, Mr. James, who is also the chairman, is famous for his sharp and unsparing words. His various biting satires and attacks on the current municipal government have made the Daily Bugle famous in the local area. There is absolute authority in people's minds. In recent days, apart from the always high-profile superhero Iron Man Tony Stark, the only one left active in New York City is the Invisible Lightning. Those who have disrupted the rhythm of the city must apologize and accept legal sanctions. Mr. James criticized the Yellow Lightning Man's style as he later criticized Spider-Man, which also added a new topic to the city's superhero side. Even though Jayon himself did not respond to these satires, and he did not save any victims most of the time, people still put this mysterious guy in the ranks of heroes. This is quite strange. Identity positioning. However, for Alexander Speer, who is now in the Tri-Wing building, the information they have in their hands can reveal something more. A fool who thinks his actions can evade satellites, his every move is under our surveillance. So have we found his hiding place? No. The slap in the face came too quickly. Alexander's face was a bit lost. Ouch, so angry. The fat man, who weighed nearly 200 pounds, took a deep gulp of coffee and then smashed the cup on the table. Slap. None of this is important. What's important is our plan. There must be a reason why the other party found Ivan Vanki. We can start from here. The mortal feud between Ivan Vanki and Tony Stark can also be used by us. I said it, we still have a chance. But your words are worrying, sir. The subordinate agent couldn't believe how such a guy became the director of SHIELD, relying on his in-depth and simple communication with Nick Fury. Keep your watch on, not just Tony Stark, but the Flash as well. I will, he continued. In addition, Coulson seems to be visiting Tony Stark frequently recently. Is Nick Fury making any new moves? I can't understand his thoughts. No one in the world will understand his thoughts. Alexander Speer imagined the Nick Fury in his memory, a nearly perfect soldier and agent, but he seemed not to trust anyone, people. Even if he has the best relationship with him at this stage, Alexander Speer only has shallow trust. Nick Fury will doubt everyone, including himself. But I will try to figure it out. If SHIELD has it, we will definitely have it, and what it doesn't have, we can't lack. After saying that, Alexander Speers waved to the standby agent to signal the end of the conversation. Their communication cannot be in name, and even the names and voices cannot be real, but Alexander Speer believes that it will not be too long before the day comes to the surface. The other side, Jung, who returned to New York, took Ivan Vanko back to his safe house. Sewer. The place you live in is so unique. Ivan Vanki looked up and down all the environment in the sewer. It was unimaginable that someone would choose to put a safe house in such a place. People with arrogant personalities would not choose to hide their heads and tail. There are no ulterior secrets that need to be hidden. Ivan Vanki would not understand. Passionate mood. The arc reactor is not a secret, but all he has to avoid all year round is pursuit from various countries, but this does not allow him to hide in the sewer to avoid pursuit. How did you come up with such an idea? Looks awesome. I brought you back just to help me, but you seem to have missed the point of embodying your value, otherwise I will kill you. Jung's mood was not as relaxed as Ivan Vanki's, and his temper deteriorated as he passed another day. Becoming very irritable. It has to be said that directly experiencing the energy expansion at 0 point while running at full strength, and also needing to hide this hidden danger of his own in front of Ivan Vanki, Riang's brain is already exhausted, and maintaining a high level of concentration at all times will make people's tempers worse. Quite grumpy. And Jaeon is like that now. Jaeon has some attainments in smart devices and relatively simple machinery, and also has a small amount of research on materials science. However, compared to Ivan Vanko and Tony Stark's expertise in nuclear physics, it is far inferior. Jaeon, who has failed to conduct reactor research, needs the help of Ivan Vanko if he wants to improve the performance of the suit, but only if this fool doesn't play tricks on him. You are conducting a reactor experiment and look at it. What good materials. Your situation is so much better than mine. Ivan Vanki didn't seem to care about Jaeon's anger at all. His focus was always on the environment here, but then it shifted. Hit the experimental equipment in the environment. The external structure is poor, and the number of coil turns is incorrect. In addition, your energy output is too high. Exceeding the upper limit of the material's load capacity will lead to dangerous accidents. Ivan Vanki talked eloquently about Jaeon's works. From a professional perspective, Ivan Vanki could directly point out Jaeon's shortcomings, unlike him who only cared about the upper limit of energy output and forgot to pay attention to the material itself. I don't care about these things, you just need to tell me, if I give you these materials, can you make something better? Yes, Ivan Vanki replied without hesitation. He simply loved this place. Although there was not as much material as he imagined, but compared with the current predicament of being controlled by others, if it was just revenge against Tony Stark, it's really great here. Time: 3 days, Ivan Vanko replied. I'll give you 3 days to modify my suit. You don't need to design the power supply circuit. Give me a finished product or you'll be dead. After saying that, Riang stopped saying anything to him. Boom! An arc of electricity rushed out of the safe house, and in the blink of an eye, Jean had disappeared into the maze of sewer pipes. Boom! Lightning ends. What replaced it was the stop of Jean's footsteps, and a lot of things he couldn't figure out what they were holding in his hands. A few packages that could be smelled as food, and more were a lot of things that had been eaten. Burned or bent metal fertilizer. I traveled to and from Moscow for 3 days. Everything that was left in your house is now here. The group of people who attacked us moved everything away. Your room has been destroyed by fire. Riang took out a useless photo frame with blurry photos on it. Half of it had been burned to carbon by the flames. Even the photo in the frame could only show the blurry silhouette of a person, but that was Ivan Vanki's most precious thing, a photo of him and his father. Thank you, suck. Ivan Vanko took a puff of a low-quality cigar and took the photo frame under the frown of Jaeon. Ivan Vanko, who was doing the final work on the suit in his hand, completed the 3-day promise he made to Jaeon. Now it was the moment when Riang rewarded him after the reversal. Your suit is very unique. I don't understand the basis of your ability. If I can figure out the distance, maybe I can help you more, but there is only so much that can be done at this stage. The energy output rate has reached 300, but at the same time the consumption coefficient has also risen sharply. I really don't understand why you want to design such an unpleasant reactor. Ivan Vanki seemed to be complaining, and finally used a soldering pen to sneak the metal buckle of the reactor into the groove on the chest of the suit. Complete. Riang picked up the suit handed over by Ivan Vanki and looked at it carefully. Even if his hand was placed on the groove of the suit that was still hot and red, Riang could not feel any burning of the skin by the high temperature. At the same time, even though Ivan Vanki was well hidden, his intentions were still captured by Riang. Don't be so smart, idiot. Jung turned around coldly. He did not take action directly, but said sarcastically, "You want to know my abilities and then counterattack my weaknesses. I won't give you such a chance. Even if you know it, you can't do it. How about, you will be the first to be killed by me?" Haha, Ivan Vanky's cleverness was exposed by Riang. His awkward smile only made him slap half of his bald head, and then he hugged the photo frame in his hand tighter, and the cigar smoke in his mouth was already mixed. The saliva became quite dirty, but even with this disgusting taste, Ivan Vanky still swallowed it in one gulp. I wonder if a person who is not even afraid of the KGB would be afraid of such intimidation. The unknown is what scares the most. Ever since Ivan Vanky learned that Riang was just a superpower and not a god, his fear has greatly disappeared. In the end, Jung saw the value of Ivan Vanko. They are now in the cooperation stage, working together to solve Tony Stark. If it had been 3 days ago, if Ivan Vanky had dared to test Jung like before, then all that was waiting for him would be a palm piercing his heart. Jaeon didn't trust anyone, not even himself. A man who has lost the most important other half of his life has lost his soul. How much expectation does he have for the life he once had, so how much resentment does Riang have for the hatred in his heart? So far, Riang has Aang no longer remembers where his bottom line is. Click, click. After rummaging through piles after piles, Ivan Vanko finished the work on the suit and delivered the finished product, while Jaeon found the experimental equipment that was returned to him in Moscow, but neither of them actually knew what could be done after that attack. How many things did you bring back? There were a lot of metal fertilizers that Jaeon couldn't tell what they were. Most of them were cleaned up by Ivan Vanky, which showed that they had no use value. A few were leftover materials from the previous fast reactor and those that Jaeon had crushed. The metal scraps were swept to the other side by Ivan Vanky. It shows that it can still be used after disassembly. But in the end, Ivan Vanky still looked very depressed. What are you looking for? You have seen my parrot, the white parrot. I thought it was burned to death in the fire. Why didn't you bring it? Ivan Vanko looked very angry. The parrot was his pet since he was a child. It was left by his father. Give him the second most important thing besides the reactor design concept. Its importance was even greater than the photo of Ivan Vanko and his father, but Jung did not bring it back, even if it was just a corpse. I didn't see it. Who cares about this kind of thing? If it's just a bird flying over the roof, you didn't tell me whether it would be in the room or maybe it had left. Low pressure. Ivan Vanky wants to tear this fool to pieces with both hands, who is indifferent to what he cares about. Jaeon's character is very bad. When he is not working and not indifferent, he is a very, very lazy and sloppy guy. Not at all, none of them are as rigorous as scholars. On the contrary, Chiakia is a persistent person who is very serious about everything. It seems that they should not be in the same camp naturally. These are two extremes that cannot be reconciled. I refuse to work without it. This is what Ivan Vanky finally choked out after being silent. He found that he did not have the confidence to resist Riang. What the other party needed was an ally who could bring benefits to him and could give up at any time. However, it was Ivan Vanky himself who made greater profits from transactions with Riang. What Ivan Vanky needs is strength. He needs an environment that can protect himself, and in this environment create a base that can resist Tony Stark, so Ivan Vanky cannot resist all of Jaeon's targeting and satire. Shoo. Jaeon looked at this guy with disbelieving but very surprised angry eyes. He couldn't imagine that the previous yes man would have the courage to say no to himself today. While Jaeon looked at him carefully, he was also weighing he himself. What does a technical ally mean to Jaeon? Cooperation. Still a win-win situation. Boom. Lightning bloomed on Riang's body, and the golden light scared Ivan Vanky. The fear began to make Ivan Vanky think again that this guy was actually a murderer who was not stingy with his own killings, until he wanted to recognize him. When you are timid, I will get it back for you, but you must arrange everything so as not to give Tony Stark a chance to escape. Remember, I will not come forward. Jung poked the reactor mass on Ivan Vanko's chest with his finger. Shell. For the convenience of experimental transformation, this guy has directly embedded the reactor outside his body with a metal frame. Although this will make him feel very hot and painful when starting up, in Ivan Vanky's own words, it is something he will remember. Tony Stark's hatred. This is a ruthless person. A fierce person and a ruthless person. Suddenly, the duo's image doesn't seem so unacceptable. Remember, the last note of Riang's voice still echoed in the safe house, but his figure had completely disappeared at this moment. 2 days later. Gulu, gulu. With the sounds of swallowing and chewing, as the wall of hamburgers gradually built in the safe house began to shrink little by little, the work in hand by Jean and Ivan Vanko also began to come to an end. With the help of the Speed Force, they can often carry out 10 days of work in one day, although this will cause them to consume a larger amount of glucose and calories. I'm almost ready, what about you? Ivan Vanki wiped the sweat from his head. There was a white-headed parrot standing on his shoulder. But this was not the one that Ivan Vanko kept in captivity before. Even though Jung ran to the Moscow tavern again, he still could not find the remains or wreckage of Ivan Vanko's parrot. Maybe it really escaped that disaster, may God bless it. This was Jaeon's honest answer to Ivan, compared to Ivan Vanki, who also proposed to get his parrot back after Ivan Vanki was recruited by Justin Hammer in the original World line. Hammer's answer was different. Just a random white parrot, he lied. And Jaeon didn't. But now, the difference has still occurred here. The answer given by Ivan Vanki in that timeline was angry inactivity and resentment, but in this world, Ivan Vanki decided to raise this unlucky one. Little guy, he seems to like birds. To be honest, if this guy refuses to accept it, then Riang will use the Speed Force to give the two of them a bird testing meal that day. Ivan Vanki stuffed a piece of compressed biscuit into the parrot's throat, which would be the bird's food for the whole day. Then, Ivan Vanki looked at Riang, who was still busy. What are you dealing with? Your suit has been completed. Why don't you take this time to investigate Tony Stark's schedule? If you want revenge, we need to know Playboy's movements. Ivan Vanki once again began to have his own little thoughts. He always played around with some side issues, using high-sounding reasons to make Jaeon unable to refuse, but at the same time he tried to use the limited time to peek at Jaeon's side. Secret. Quote. Riang looked back at this guy. Of course he knew what Ivan Vanki was thinking. The research he was doing was not in materials or nuclear physics, so compared to Riang himself, he was not good at physics. Ivan Vanki is not proficient in chemical materials science either. But they can test each other. Riang did not reveal this guy's little thoughts, but instead activated his speed power again. Boom. The burst of golden lightning is just a trance illusion. Buzz. Ivan Vanki felt that the figure in front of him was shaking for a second, and even Riang didn't seem to move. The only difference was that the next second after the vision shifted, Ivan Vanki saw Riang return again. In situ. And he was holding 2 pieces of work clothes in his hands. Morocco will have the F27 World Championship on the 1th of this month. Tony Stark will participate. This is work clothes and a forged work permit. I will take you in, but you must complete the job at hand. Remember, I will not give you anything in the process. Any help you can. Riang once again poked the reactor shell on the metal frame of Ivan Vanki with his finger and said. He still did not point out Ivan Vanki's embarrassment, but once again emphasized that he would not give him any help in the process of killing Tony Stark. This was the second time. Why? Are you worried that I will fail or that you will be exposed if I am implicated afterwards? Don't be stupid, buddy. With my arrogant personality towards you these past few days, you have been exposed long ago, so why do you need to hide and be afraid? At this moment, you don't need to know anything. Riang denied Ivan Vanki's remarks, and also denied his intention to further test his little thoughts. Tisk. There was silence once again in the safe house. After putting aside the overalls of the track attendant, he stopped talking to Ivan Vanki. His speed was too fast, and Jean's rhythm was so fast that he could think. In an instant, I thought of many things that Ivan Vanki had never thought of. So from a one-sided perspective, Ivan Vanki's little calculation is almost transparent. Creak, creak. For a moment, apart from the little sounds of the white-headed parrots eating and happy faces, there was only the sharp sound coming from the subtle friction and collision between metals. And this pair who established a cooperative relationship amidst friction are also extremely sharp. At night, Jung arrived outside the safe house, and the golden lightning almost made it unnecessary for him to cover his whereabouts because it was meaningless. What Jaeon needs to run is to use repeated routes to evade the satellite computer's lock on his whereabouts, because the arc generated during repeated runs will cover the entire city, which can cover up Jaeon's trajectory back to the safe house. But as Ivan Vanko said, Jung's existence is like a beacon in the dark night. Both the government and other secret agencies have already noticed him, so his concealment can only be temporary. Such speculation has led to rock fan Venki misjudged Jaeon's purpose. He mistakenly thought that his partner was just a coward, and Ivan Venki disdained to cooperate with cowards. If it hadn't been suppressed by Jung's unilateral force, maybe he would have chosen to rebel. However, only he himself knows what his true thoughts are, and he never trusts anyone. The safe house has been exposed, so in Jaeon's judgment, the entire New York area is no longer safe. He ran to the farthest place from the center of New York. Looking at the open coast from a distance, he thought that this was the most suitable place for him. Where to run with all your strength. Waiting quietly, waiting for the sea breeze to arrive, bringing zero time. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Dang, time is up. Boom. The golden arc surged like never before, and Riang turned on the reactor device on the chest of the suit. The violent overclocking current began to act around Riang's body. Under the rapid acceleration, the speed doubled, and Riang almost saw himself. In front of him was a barrier made entirely of lightning. In a trance, a momentary illusion made Jung notice something, but his purpose today was not to increase his own speed, or to calculate his upper limit of speed. Jaeon has another purpose today. Bang bang bang. Running at super speed, at the fastest time in 0. Jaeon's speed exceeded 100 times the speed of sound. Although this was only temporary, this speed allowed Jaeon to do things that he couldn't do at other times. Guys, help me. Riang stepped into the realm of time. It was a wonderful world. All matter reflected by speed and time seemed to no longer exist. The vectors of space and time were converted into speed and time. And countless other people living in it have all become Jaeon. This is a long river, the long river of time. They are all remnants of time for Jaeon, and Jaeon needs their help tonight. Assuming that I will definitely eat fruit at the next moment, then in the future I will definitely eat the fruit and throw it away. So if I know the action of eating fruit at the next moment before it happens, and end it in advance, and drink water instead, then the future caused by eating the fruit before will be changed, and the me in that future will lose its meaning, the changed time will no longer exist, and the future me will become the time residue of the present me. At this second, Jean used his intervention in the future to create two time residues. It's not about talking to countless hot people, but about creating. This is quite a brain-consuming thing. Jaeon needs to allow himself to complete the action of changing the future and intercepting the future at the moment when the time and place changes, and pull his future self out of the river of time. It's very laborious and very mental. But he did it after all, even though there were only two. I never believed in myself. Just like now, this fool has ruined my time and everything about me. 3 hours into the future, Riang was looking at the other two in front of him with an angry expression. Himself, he said to his other self who was also pulled out. It's better to listen to what he has to say. I don't think killing him will change the status quo. Although what you did has touched your own bottom line, asshole, said another Jaeon. Just like Jaang's own heart, Jaang, who got time, began to lack trust in himself. He didn't know if his future self would decide to kill his current self for revenge after being summoned. But as a zero-time Jung, there is a reason why he must persuade them. I need you. We both know you need us, and all you do and think is just our past, the second Jung quipped. Put yourself in someone else's shoes. What will happen in a person's heart when he knows that he is just a meaningless remnant of time? Anger or hatred? If their minds weren't almost the same, maybe the three Jungs would have started fighting by now. Intercept Tony Stark and use Ivan Vanko to attract people's attention, but I need a victim who can withstand the fire, said Jung at 0 o'clock. This is his plan. From the very beginning, Jaeon has not forgotten the original reason why he was looking for Ivan Vanko. The original reason was to find a helper who could replace Tony Stark in building the reactor to repeat the accident that occurred during the power outage that night. Jung believes that as long as the incident is repeated completely, the reason for Freya's disappearance will be found. The reason why he has always failed to complete this process repeatedly is that the power outage process he performed is different from what Stark did originally. The reactor's power outage mechanism is completely different from ordinary power outages. Aang Zai is not proficient in physics, so he wants more help from relevant professionals. After that, they searched for the reactor information and found the reason for Ivan Vanki, so that Ivan Vanki's transformation of the armor was just an incidental help in the process, and it was also a method used by Riang to cover up what he concealed. Jaeon was a man who couldn't even trust himself, so much so that he chose to laboriously create 2 time remnants instead of 1 during the formation process. The 3 pillars mean support, unlike 2 points and 1 line, which may break at any time. Jung calculated everything thoroughly, and he also calculated himself in it. If it weren't for Freya, you would have died miserably. 3 hours later, Riang said with a gloomy face, staring at the 0 time. We all know what is going on in everyone's minds, so why don't we join hands, said the second Jaeon, and then he continued. Ivan Vanki needs 1 here, 1 to attract firepower, and a top contractor. Then the question is, who can ensure that the experiment will be successful in the end? The second Jaeon finally expressed his thoughts. Not being afraid of death is just superficial, but he is worried that his own death is of no value. What else can a remnant of time that has no meaning in its existence do? You are trying to replace me. At 0 time, Jung unabashedly exposed his words that looked like a crown but were actually hypocritical. But I am the core 0. The experiment can fail and everything can be repeated, but I can't die. 0 clenched his fists, while the other 2 Riang had angry expressions after hearing this. I have to say that convincing yourself is a rather tangled process, especially when you all have the idea of killing yourself, everything will become more complicated. The 3 Riangs have no trust in each other. 0 Jung hopes to complete everything perfectly, while the other 2 also want to take over the fruits of success. It can be said that the 3 Jungs each have their own agenda. But don't forget, their consciousness is almost the same, which means that there is one thing that all 3 genes know. I can make you all disappear. While speaking, 0's Riang had already made his body shine with the luster of the speed force, although his power was temporarily unable to keep up with the speed of the other 2 due to the separation of 2 time remnants. But as Riang in time 0, he is a speedster who can summon countless selves. Unlike the other 2 selves, the speed of the other Riang is limited. Their speed stayed at the time they were summoned. It can be said that the speed of Riang is almost at its peak within 3 hours after 0 o'clock, but also such heat can be consumed, which means that if the speed runs out, they will die. Want to compare? ... The 2 hot answers were silent. Sometimes, deterrence is far more effective than actual force. That night, under the silent sea breeze, 3 lightning bolts rotated one after another. Although their hearts followed a combination of non-trust, at least in the context of having the same goal and a decision to follow, they had nothing but cooperation. There is a way to go. Far East Nepal. Inside the Kamataj Guardian Shrine. Master Ji Yuyi, the gem is shining again. The fat Asian man sitting cross-legged on the futon opened his eyes. He is the reserve administrator of Kamathaj's library, but his work has undergone small-scale changes in the past few days. Kamataj's master, the supreme mage, suddenly decided to move the gem out of the library and place it in the temple hall. 34 registered mages formed a barrier to guard and monitor the gem. Although the Supreme Mage Ancient One did not express the reason for this, it can be seen from the importance attached to this matter that there must be a problem with time in this world. The brighter the light, the greater the variables in the future. Master, is time really unchangeable? Kurizm, who is sitting on the left side of Ancient One, is the most valued disciple of Ancient One. He is the most qualified practitioner that Ancient One has seen in the past 100 years. Similarly, Kurizm, who has diverse thoughts, is in front of him. The bigger variables were also the one that Ji Yuyi was most worried about before. For example, the slight change in time that Kurizm noticed at this moment is what makes him different from what other mages see. Fate is doomed. This is the first lesson I teach you after you walk into Kamataj. Never underestimate your destiny. Ji Yuyi narrowed his eyes slightly and replied to Kurizm. Her answer was not "it's about time," and this is also what Ji Yuyi is afraid of. Is fate really unchangeable? Ji Yuyi found that the future he saw was interrupted again. In the quiet and lonely New York sewer safe house, with the departure of Jen, everything here has entered darkness. So much so, apart from the disgusting smell of sewers that makes people feel sick to their stomachs, there are only a few life forms darker than rats and other rodents that are active and active again. However, even in the darkness, there was a dim light that was swaying back and forth. Goo! Bird call. The white-headed parrot standing on the owner's shoulder was begging for food from Ivan Vanko. It used its furry head to rub Ivan Vanko's cheek back and forth. Even though his beard was so sharp that it made the white-headed parrot's neck feel itchy, this little guy still happy to do so. Ivan Vanki treated this white-headed parrot as carefully as he treated his former pet. Ivan Vanki infused his new passion into this white-headed parrot, as if apart from research and revenge, only raising birds was his greatest pursuit. But now, Ivan Vanki is not just hanging around. He is looking for something. Shish, be quiet little guy, don't wake up the smart devices here with your voice. We have to take advantage of the owner's absence to do some sneaky things. Ivan Vanki did not feel at all because of his current sleazy behavior. Ashamed, he looked proud. He was trying to pry into the secret of Riang. That mysterious and terrifying guy left a very bad impression on Ivan Vanki, but because of this Ivan Vanki was eager to know everything about him, even if it was just a name rather than the code name of Lightning. Yes, Ivan Vanko never knew Jaeon's name during the 3 days, and was only called by his code name. Jaeon retained the greatest wariness against Ivan Vanko, which made the Russian dare not stay alone even at night. It's here. If that fool suddenly came back with a sudden attack, all the previous efforts would be wasted. Ivan Vanki was worried that the other party would become angry and kill him. But today is different. Ivan Vanki has calculated the time it takes each time Jen leaves. In 3 days, whenever it reaches this point in time, General will inevitably leave the safe house and run to the city. Although he doesn't know why, Ivan Vanki can use this time to do many things he wanted to do before. A hard drive. It was loaded with a virus, designed to crack Jaeon's smart computer. Ivan Vanki didn't have the technology to compare with Jaeon in terms of software, but in terms of mechanical hardware, he could completely crush this PhD in electronics. Limited by the limitations of the materials used, Jung can create super codes and super intelligence, but he cannot perfectly match a central control computer to load these programs, and what Ivan Vanki needs is to use a hard disk to wrap around. Use the monitoring of smart devices to peek into Jaeon's secrets. Data always needs a place to save. Ivan Vanki doesn't believe that a central control terminal in New Oda will not have a storage hub, and he only needs to crack it from the mechanical part. We will succeed. Right, darling? Ivan Vanki kissed the white-headed parrot gently on its forehead. Goo! The parrot whose neck itched began to coo again. However, such a voice seems to be coming from the voyeuristic desire that screams from the bottom of Ivan Vanki's heart, and he can't help it. Early morning. Real-time monitoring, power on. Jaeon, wearing a bright yellow lightning leather jacket, returned to the safe house. Now he is exhausted. Jaeon has never been so tired since he obtained the Speed Force. Creating time remnants is not as simple as imagined. Jaeon may be more proficient and use this ability easily next time, but now he must replenish his lost energy through rest. The loss of lightning requires a process of replenishment, and during this period of time, he must ensure that he has sufficient energy. Break time. But, in fact, Jaeon may not have this opportunity. Record the energy consumption after turning on the computer, save it in the archive and simulate it for next time to calculate the minimum loss route. Jung gave advance instructions to the intelligent system through the software in the leather jacket while taking off his suit. What's rare is that today, Riang didn't turn into a bolt of lightning and take off his clothes as usual. His movements became very slow, and he once again recalled the feeling of taking off his clothes with his hands. Riang suddenly realized that he hadn't been like this for a long time. Live like a real person. The feeling of being lost lingered in his mind. But after that, he was interrupted by a warning sound from the smart device. Warning, power on, warning, power on, warning. In an instant, the entire safe house lit up with red lights. Just behind Riang, Ivan Vanki, who had just gotten up from the sofa, suddenly felt that he had made a mistake. Perfect spying and means, but Ivan Vanki forgot to bypass the retrieval device. He originally planned to keep all the shocking things he saw last night secret, and use them as capital to threaten Jaeon in the future. But now, Ivan Vanko must prepare to face Jaeon's wrath immediately. Ta-ta Dao. Ivan Vanki quickly ran out of the lounge next door and entered the safe house's laboratory. Under the incomprehensible expression on Jaeon's face, he began to quickly organize his reactor energy framework. He had to ensure that his actions were in Jaeon's direction, before complete reaction. But is this possible? Hey, morning. Riang's mind slowed down for a moment. He didn't know what Ivan Vanki was doing. Maybe it was research or something else. Until next moment. Goo. A sound from the warning source came from the warning device. File unknown browsing history. File unknown browsing history. Warning warning goo goo, goo goo. This is the sound recorded by the real-time monitoring in the final stage after it was bypassed last night. In fact, it was never turned off, but it was in a semi-sleep state during the time when Jaeon was no longer in the safe house. There was nothing in the safe house. It is worth keeping secret. Turning on high computing power equipment for a long time will consume a lot of power. Even with the support of the internal circulation of the suit, it will not help. Jung does not have too many external financial sources, so he must save every moment of his life. Split expenses. He is not afraid of his secret being exposed, but what he is angry about is betrayal. Parrot call. Ivan Vanko. Now Jaeon has understood the reason for this warning in an instant. Ivan Vanki is still using his careful thoughts to counter Jaeon. Even when faced with the suppression of strength, he still shows his fearless challenge, psychology. Are you really not afraid of death? Riang turned around and looked at Ivan Vanko and said angrily. However, at the moment he turned around, the answer from Ivan Vanki also arrived. Boom, pat. The powerful impact directly pushed Jean out of the laboratory, and even with the hard outer wall of the sewer as a buffer, Jean still felt great pain. It's not the most important thing that my brain was slow for a moment. The most important thing is that this energy cannon is actually charged. Now that you're running, you're running. Ivan Vanki put on the complete metal reactor frame on his body. The new weapon, which he hadn't had time to actually test the effect of, now told Ivan Vanki through actual actions that it was useful. Riang looked at the weapon in the opponent's hand in disbelief. He had known for a long time that Ivan Vanki was not a fool, but he actually spent just one night making a weapon to counter himself. This is impossible. Everything is possible. I took the risk that you would suddenly come back and kill me. I read all the hidden information in your computer and spent 3 hours modifying my weapon. It was originally used to fight against Iron Man's leather shell. The armor is now electrified by me. Ivan Vanki seemed to have seen through something very interesting. He stared feverishly at Jung, who was paralyzed by the electric current and could not move, and continued. Your reflexes exceed the speed of sound, but are you faster than that? Answer me. Ivan Vanki kicked Riang in the stomach. He was venting his resentment that he had suppressed for the past few days. The paralysis of the electric current will interrupt the control of your brain nerves over your body. Even if you have the fastest speed in the world, you are still not an ant. Just run, get up and run. Sizz. Ivan Vanki whipped the motor device on the electric lock and hit Riang's limbs hard while making a roaring sound. The long period of depression had made Ivan Vanki feel huge humiliation, and now the outburst seemed particularly violent. Even if such an attack cannot harm Riang's body, the conduction from the electrical energy will flow into Riang's body along with the energy part. The current that interferes with the propagation of the human body's electrical signals is enough to disrupt Riang's control of the body. Never felt such humiliation. I'll make you pay. Riang was struggling to stand up from the ground, but he once again found Ivan Vanki's foot stepping on his back. With the strength of the person and the weight of the metal frame, Riang felt like he was carrying hundreds of kilograms on his back. It's still hard to move even half an inch. He must have seen my countermeasures against abilities. At this moment, angry and struggling, what he was thinking about was not how to turn around and fight back, but how to reveal his counterattack ability. This is what Riang has been most worried about. He is not afraid that his abilities will be targeted, but is angry that the means he left to restrain himself came true so quickly. But fortunately, Riang is not as powerless as Ivan Vanki imagined. You will be the first to take revenge on Stark. Ivan Vanko violently picked up Riang's hair from the ground, and then punched him in the face. Bang! The fierce punch brought the steel's strength directly to the front of Riang's face, but the effect was not as devastating as Ivan Vanki imagined. You are very strong, you are very powerful, he continued, thinking that this would not be able to get rid of the frustration and hatred in his heart. However, Jung will also not sit still and wait for death. Why is there no electricity? There was blood seeping out of the corners of Riang's mouth, but the corners of his mouth were raised. Riang looked at Ivan Vanke's eyes and looked directly at him in a joking manner. You think it's all there? Kacha kacha. Ivan Vanke didn't see what he wanted in Riang's smile. He didn't understand that there was any possibility of resistance in Riang now. He clenched his fist again and wanted to punch this arrogant man again. A fool who is blindly confident. I can shock you and crush you bug to death with my fist. After Ivan Vanke finished speaking, he punched Jung in the face again. But this time, boom, there was a surge of electric energy, and everything in the safe house was smashed to pieces. Violent arcs quickly spread to the surrounding environment under a certain impact. Strong electromagnetic interference was released at the core of the sewer. In the innermost area, a devastating destructive impact swept towards the location of Ivan Vanke and Riang. Point. You traitor, Jung spat on Ivan Vanko's face before his fist fell. Same day, at noon, the NCPD New York police, who are always late, began to enter the Hell's Kitchen area to conduct the first round of investigation of the unexpected electrical energy accident in the city. The impact of electrical energy transmitted from the ground spread directly through the water to every part of the city with water pipes. Almost instantly, the entire civil power grid in New York City was completely paralyzed, except for the Stark Group Energy Company in the center of New York City. The building still stands outside. Headquarters such as Hammer Industries and Austrian Capital Group also experienced small-scale power outages. However, as the culprit of everything, Jung, wearing a bright yellow leather jacket, just slowly ran out of another corner of New York. Next to him was an intelligent system that had been destroyed and only the intelligent motherboard remained. An electromagnetic nuclear explosion destroyed everything in the safe house and completely destroyed the place where Jaeon had lived for 3 months. It's time to say goodbye, Jung said silently, putting on his own hood. Just last night, while Jaeon was preparing the time remnant plan, he also completed all the preparatory work to be produced in the laboratory. The simulation experiment materials had been completely moved out of the laboratory, leaving behind the facts in the safe house. Only a small part of the original remains. But even so, Ivan Vanke's peak still cost Riang a lot of money. The most regrettable thing is that in this nuclear power explosion incident, Riang did not find where Ivan Vanko went in the end. The electric energy paralyzed Riang's body, so that he could only keep himself intact in the collapse of the sewer safe house, and after regaining consciousness, he groped for his remaining materials in the ruins, but Ivan Vanke disappeared, and he went where? Today is the 22nd of this month, which means there are 5 days left before Tony Stark will participate in the Formula One Racing Championship. If you want revenge, I will find you. This time, Jung will no longer have any good intentions towards that guy. He will join Tony Stark to send Ivan Vanko to hell. And similarly, Jung's battle suit. The source of this nuclear power explosion was not elsewhere, but the chest reactor of the Riang suit. The design comes from Ivan Vanke. As a designer, Ivan Vanke once complained about Jaeon's useless design that does not require input parts. But what Ivan Vanke did not expect was that this would be used by Jaeon as a counterattack module. The transformation of the internal energy of Jaeon's speed force into electrical energy means that he no longer needs to consume target elements to create energy like Ivan Vanko or Tony Stark. In fact, the core purpose of Jaeon's order for Ivan Vanko to design this reactor is just to need a Vanke. The energy center itself can provide it. Moreover, this will become an important means for him to release explosions. But now, Jaeon no longer needs it. Boom, running and accumulating energy for a new day. New York Harbor Warehouse District. Every city has its abandoned areas, even in a bustling city like New York. Compared with the bustling old areas, the small corner of New York Harbor that was once occupied by black hippies has now been getting excited. Even if it's just a temporary foothold. Today is the 25th of this month. Jaeon had 2 days to prepare for his trip to Morocco and to check for possible omissions in the plans he had arranged in the past. Before that, Jaeon was busy discussing real countermeasures with his other 2 selves. I went back to the safe house and looked at it. There was nothing left there. The New York Police Department blocked the news and said that the city's power grid was leaking and malfunctioning, but I found traces of agents in the ruins. Riang, who appeared second, said slowly that the speed force he possessed had been exhausted in the past few days, which meant that he was destined to be a sacrificial role player in the next plan. We all know that sooner or later we will be targeted by the government. This is not the most important thing, said Jung, who goes by the codename 3 Hours. We are all the same person. There is no need to talk about this kind of thing in detail. We can directly explain what to do next, said Jung at 0 p.m. In response to his question, Second Jaeon answered with practical actions. It's very simple. Buzzing. After a period of distortion and cross-dressing, Jaeon put on a complete suit that was placed in a pile of debris in a corner of the warehouse, and then distorted his appearance through cell vibration. It was just a blur of perspective, and Jaeon had already become a completely different person. Tony Stark, the other two Jungs said at the same time. Everyone can do this, but you have never thought about my judgment from the perspective of a mortal. This is the last thing I can do for you. After saying this, the body of the young man began to change. Somewhat weak. Every consumption of the speed force will put a huge burden on his body. After all, time remnants rely on energy to exist, otherwise they cannot stay for a long time, and eventually dissipate under the interference of the stable time flow of this world. It is almost the last thing of every time remnant, destiny. Thank you. Zero and Sanchi nodded silently. Even though they didn't trust each other, they also expressed their respect for the victims for being able to make such a choice. After saying, "Here you go," at time 0, Riang took out a 3-point reactor cube from the back table of the warehouse. Made using Ivan Vanke's technology, 3 hours ago, Jung felt a little surprised by this. He found that he did not fully understand his own mind, which looked at the problem from the perspective of zero time. So we are not the same person after all. I am your core. Zero smiled at the other two. This weird style of painting gave people a feeling that they despised themselves. But after all, what he said was correct, and then Jung continued, from brand new materials, I spent almost all the money we saved to invest in Austrian capital. The scattered shares have been completely cashed out by me, otherwise we can make more. The seemingly inconspicuous reactors are just like those made by Ivan Vanke before, although they still look crudely made. After all, there is no assembly line processing and production, and the energy storage reactors made by individuals are heated and use the speed of the speed force to rush the work. The target element in the core part was replaced by Riang using his own speed force to store, which can give the other two themselves a longer survival environment. Although it won't last long, it will allow you to see more of the world, Zero said. However, the other two Riang did not reply. They just took over the piece that replaced their life energy savings. Now, the three Jungs are all tied to each other on the same front. Even if they have differences and distrust, no matter from the perspective of any one of them, from the perspective of believing in their own opinions, this point is more important, far more than trusting others. Thank you, I will do what I should do. Jaeon didn't say more, but what he wanted to express was already very obvious, what he should do. Is death. Boom. Such a sensational scene is obviously not suitable for the three hot men, just like the serious atmosphere will make the hippies uneasy. Shua. Lightning blooms, targeting Morocco. I will be waiting for you, Tony Stark here. At time 0, Jung looked at the two figures of him walking away, and his figure gradually moved towards the depths of the warehouse area. That's where the experimental site was placed, and it's also where Jaeon used to recreate the scene of the New York blackout 6 months ago. A decent environment can make people happy to research. Who wouldn't like to live in a dirty corner as a rat? It won't last long. The self-deprecating laughter finally came to an end in the darkness, and the enthusiastic figure disappeared along with his voice. At the same time, inside the Sky aircraft carrier thousands of meters above New York City. Target retrieved, locked position record of power disappearance time. Concerning the blackout that occurred in the Hell's Kitchen area 2 nights ago and spread to the entire city, unlike the police's judgment, S.H.I.E.L.D. conducted a new assessment and inspection of the incident. I have to say that S.H.I.E.L.D. is indeed a group of excellent and absolutely elite agents. Just a tentative comparison of the environmental analysis and feasibility at the time, S.H.I.E.L.D. found unusual news from the satellite positioning search that night. It's the Lightning Man. Phil Coulson looked at the golden arc flashing through the sewer outlet of Hell's Kitchen that his subordinate surveillance recorder intercepted from the recording paper. He had long been used to monitoring the person code-named Lightning, who came and went without a trace. The only difference this time was that they actually captured the clues of the other party. The sewer is such an unnoticeable place. Phil Coulson shook his head mindlessly. If he hadn't noticed the other party's existence in this accident, S.H.I.E.L.D. might not have been able to find any clues about the guy codenamed Lightning Man even after trying hard for a whole year. New York's sewers are complex and have existed here since before the founding of the People's Republic of China. Locals have built a huge network of underground pipes. After the founding of the People's Republic of China, they underwent numerous reinforcement processes, and during World War II, there were densely populated air raid caves and abandoned buildings, armed security base. It can be said that the underground pipelines in New York are a large maze that is contrary to the above-ground world. There is no one in this world who can completely record the comprehensive distribution network of the entire pipeline. Even if S.H.I.E.L.D. wants to find someone in it, it will appear powerless. And this is also the reason why countless super-villains will choose to build their nests in sewers in the future. They are really hard to find. Tisk. Phil Coulson shook his head helplessly. Even though he now knew the area where the Lightning Man once operated, the Lightning Man must have changed his location after this incident. Their search would be meaningless, and the same Phil Coulson said the focus is not on this area. Leave it to the director to decide. After thinking to no avail, Agent Phil raised his wrist and looked at the time. It was already time to deliver the records today. Immediately, he closed the door and left. There are still countless tasks piled up in the busy monitoring and search room. The environment here is still the same and the tasks are still the same. Except that a certain employee who left his seat for a minute to go to the bathroom after Agent Phil left came back again, as if everything was okay. Only this clerk himself understood that under his watch, a 9-headed skull was grinning. The news has been released. Heizhou mission codename, Lightning Derailment. My name is Tony Stark, I'm okay, I'm famous, no need to introduce myself. Because of the presence of the palladium element in the arc reactor, I saved my life, but at the same time the radiation of this element would kill me, so I lost my company to the most important person to me, and now. A beautiful woman told me, just do what you want to do. I just want to do what I want to do now. Accelerate. Woo, whoosh. On the racing track, Mercedes-Benz Formula cars roar on the track. This is a grand event in Morocco. There are famous racing drivers from all over the world. This is a racing competition of the highest scale, and what is more eye-catching than this is that the game ushered in an exciting racing driver named Tony Stark. Hum, hum. The engine continues to roar under the hood, and the horsepower of the car is turned to the maximum. Everyone wants to achieve a proud ranking in this eye-catching competition. All racers are trying their best to use their best compete with your driving skills. AD. Tunnel. Highway. Tony Stark, driving the unique blue and white F1 car, took the lead and rushed to the front of the team. Just like the character he has shown recently, his arrogant and daring style of doing things made him make a lot of money at this moment. Audience's eyeballs. Passing through different routes, passing by the intersection of black and white, concentrating everything on the pursuit of speed, feeling the roar of the wind, the flow of your own blood, and the roar of the engine that makes your blood flow. Tony Stark, wearing an orange coat and an extraordinarily strong body, Ivan Vanke stepped over the protective fence and appeared on both sides of the track. There was a toothpick in his mouth, but Ivan Vanke's eyes were looking straight ahead and scanning the surroundings with a wary look. Even though the moment he crossed the guardrail, there were already guards trying to stop him, But the extra strong exoskeleton body bonus that the arc reactor metal frame gave Ivan Vanke directly allowed him to push away the man who tried to stop him. The powerful force pushed the security guard into hell with just one push. His chest was directly pressed down to create a fist-sized dent. However, no matter whether he could survive in the end, everything in the scene was instantly plunged into a roaring tsunami. The audience kept cheering for the upcoming racing frenzy. This was the most enthusiastic scene of the F1 championship. The place. Ivan Vanke faced the sunshine in the sky. His heart was as hot as the weather today. The burn wound in his clothes under the overload jacket had not yet healed. The nuclear power explosion caused by Ryang that night did not directly kill Ivan Vanke. The energy buffer of the arc reactor saved his life. In fact, Ivan Vanke did not suffer much damage at all. His burns came from self-harm caused by activating his own reactor. However, the collapsed safe house forced Ivan Vanke to enter into rivers where sewage is discharged. Following the pipeline, Ivan Vanke avoided the first round of searches by Jayon after he woke up. Now that he has no chance to take advantage, he may be killed instantly by that guy at any time. And the most annoying thing is that Jung might be waiting in a corner for him to kill Tony Stark and then kill himself again. Tony Stark must die no matter what. Pay. Ivan Vanke spit out the toothpick in his mouth. Judging from the frequency of the shaking of the ground, the cars on the track will soon be approaching here. Tony Stark. Under Ivan Vanke's hateful eyes, he repeatedly recited the name that made him want to eat his flesh and blood. I am afraid that only in this way can he temporarily paralyze himself and forget about the fear and revenge brought by Jayon. Ivan Vanke must do it today. Revenge. Stark, Stark, Stark. On both sides of the track, crazy fans were chanting Tony Stark's name. They may not all be fans of Formula One, but they must have heard and seen the legend of New York's latest hero Iron Man. This slutty playboy completely exposed his image to the media and received nothing, even though he was called many people or disgusted. But I have to say that wherever he is, there must be countless fanaticism. Ivan Vanke, wearing an orange work coat, stood on the track with a weird posture, waiting for Tony Stark to arrive. He was already eager to try. No one in the cheering crowd cares about this inconspicuous little character. Perhaps the camera that accidentally passed by will record his appearance. In fact, Ivan Vanke was actually captured by a camera. VIP room. Pepper seemed to see Ivan's hostility that could almost break through the TV screen. The nervous lady began to feel uneasy and felt great worry about Tony's life safety. In recent days, Tony Stark's increasingly bizarre behavior has affected the minds of those close to him. As Tony Stark's most loyal employee and also his girlfriend, Peppa couldn't help but feel sorry for his state of mind. Feel worried. Even though there are countless tasks waiting to be processed in the Stark group today, Peebo still chose to come here in a private happy car to pay attention to Stark throughout the process. Wow, there was a sound of surprise, as if the audience in the VIP room had discovered something extraordinary. The TV screen that flashed by suddenly cut to the man who had just flashed past. Scylla. On the screen, Ivan Vanke violently tore open his coat. Under his extraordinarily strong coat, it looked as if something was stuffed inside. The irregular edges and smooth surfaces seemed to have been stuffed with metal objects. Visual sense. Bass. An eye-catching light emanated from Yifan Wonk's chest, but it was supposed to be Stark's exclusive creation. Reactor. In an instant, this name entered the minds of countless people who saw the picture. Everyone in the world only thought that the reactor was the unique work of the Stark group, but only a few people understood that it was not just Tony Stark who could build it. In the picture, as Ivan Vanke exposed his metal frame outside the body, the huge energy flow released by the reactor as the core burned all of Ivan Vanke's underwear in an instant, and the gap between the metal structures, the connection became the only obstacle blocking his body. But still, the black and white metal frame makes people feel shocked beyond the times. Wow, inexplicable crises and bloody fear began to strike everyone in the hall. What does he want to do? Such doubts flashed through the minds of countless people. Chapter 31. The arc reactor, which was originally defined by the world as being impossible to replicate, would appear in such a place, and what was even more unbelievable was that this tall guy was using the energy taken from the arc reactor to frighten the kids. Of course, for all the viewers present and even those in front of the TV, they may not be paying attention to how Ivan Vanke, this guy who looks so graphic, got the reactor, but what he wants to do next. Soon, Ivan Vanke used practical actions to prove what he wanted to do. Nourish. The high-output electric charge creates an excessive amount of energy flow, which is poured into Ivan Vanke's pair of lock whips. The crackling arc explosion is frightening. He moves towards the track step by step, waving his hand inadvertently. It was a mess and burning heat. Boom. Ivan Vanke didn't come for a show. He came to show the world the power of the Vanke family's arc reactor. He swung violently towards the track under the scorching sun ahead. Crackle. A shattering explosion. VIP room. This shocking scene caused all the guests to dodge unconsciously. Ms. Pepper's wide eyes were at a loss. She was very familiar with the things in the picture. Combined with this menacing momentum, Pepper is frightened by the danger Stark is about to face. On the other side, another person who had paid attention to the whole process, Justin Hammer, had a flash of stunning light in his eyes. Justin Hammer, who cannot be replaced, seems to have seen what he needs. This is the most important link currently lacking in Hammer Industries' Iron Warriors plan, and with the appearance of Ivan Vanko on TV, Hammer saw something to fill that void. The entrance to the VIP room. Fatty Happy, Tony Stark's assistant to former Stark Industries president assistant, hurried over. No time to explain, hurry up and get in the car. Carrying a gold and red suitcase, Happy waved to Peppa Pig. Go quickly. In the rearview mirror of the car, Peebo's eyes were panicked, and he was full of anxiety about Stark's safety. Although he was not aware of what the contents of the suitcase represented, he trusted in the backup plan left by Stark. Peebo believed that Happy would not trick him. Although no one knew what Ivan Vanki's purpose was, when he thought of Tony Stark exposing his trip to the internet without any scruples, and at the same time the other party's origin was unknown and the time of arrival was menacing, Peebo almost you don't need to think about it to understand that the danger must be aimed at Tony. In fact, Happy is worthy of being the old driver left by Tony Stark to Pepper. Sit tight. The handsome fat man held the steering wheel tightly with both hands and stepped on the accelerator, his eyes changed. You know what my previous nickname was. They all called me Wuling Hongguang. Happy smiled confidently at Peebo through the rearview mirror, the meaning of his words unclear. What? Ms. Pepper looked confused, but time did not give her enough time to adjust. Boom. Moving forward with the engine at full power, Happy drove the car violently through the originally fully enclosed track blockade and crashed into the track road wrapped in layers of blockades. Gee, boom. Stark's special car was even better in Happy's driving. The tires with almost perfect grip left a deep mark on the road with twisted patterns, and the subsequent explosive acceleration process made people feel the speed and a collision of passions. If someone asked Ms. Pepper sitting in the car a question at this time, are you touched that Mr. Happy tried so hard to save your lover, Mr. Tony Stark? I don't dare to move, I really don't dare to move. By the way, Peebo must have been crying when he spoke. Because it's so fast. Happy, the dedicated personal bodyguard, is the most loyal to Tony Stark in the world besides Peppa. He will even ignore his own life in order to protect the safety of his employer, so can he get there? On the track, looking at the fast formula cars on the track, Ivan Vanki concentrated on waiting for the arrival of his expected goal. The hot crack has almost become an abyss that separates the track from the outside. Even though the guards now have guns, no one dares to step forward to stop him. This guy is too crazy. The live event is still going on, and the speed is a single collision with a racing car traveling over 120 miles per hour can take away anyone's life. No one dares to risk his life to verify why this crazy guy came here. Ahead, after passing through the tunnel, a blue and white formula marked with number 0 rushed into the audience's field of vision. This was Tony Stark's car. Today, Tony did not carry Jarvis, his personal electronic butler. In order to facilitate the competition, Tony even shut down any other equipment produced by the Stark Group except the reactor. He enjoys the excitement of the last moments of his life in the most joyful craziness. However, Tony Stark didn't know that in a place unknown to him, a threat that could kill him at will had arrived. Tony Stark, as if a speaker was installed in his throat, Ivan Vanki's roar even covered up the roar of the racing engine for a time. His hatred drove him to swing with maximum power. The simple metal frame had enough defense, but the strengthening effect brought by the exoskeleton is even greater than that of the Iron Man mecha because of its lighter weight. Ivan Vanki, who is absolutely explosive, refused to give in when faced with the impact of Tony Stark's 120-mile-per-hour car. Boom. Violent lock whip blows. Ivan Vanki never thought of surviving from the beginning. The swinger is at the center of the car. His goal is to go to Tony Stark's head. Hatred covers everything about Ivan Vanko. He wants to split Tony Stark in half with a whip. If it weren't for the length of the lock whip, which couldn't directly split the car in two with one blow, Ivan Vanko could even tear the entire car directly from the middle with one blow. Click click. The metal shell of the racing car was split instantly under the action of the high-energy current of the reactor, and the huge impact caused the front of the racing car to deflect. Sitting in the cockpit of the racing car, Tony Stark also saw Ivan Vanko's attack for the first time. He turned the steering wheel and tried to avoid it, but it was already too late. While quickly unbuckling his seat belt, Tony Stark decisively kicked the car door and rolled down the side of the car. If he hadn't escaped, Ivan Vanko's whip would have killed him. Wow, there is an inconspicuous position in the auditorium, in the corner near the final track stage. It is almost impossible to see the full view of the track. It is difficult to imagine that there are people sitting in this position. But in fact, Jaeon is here now. To be precise, there were two Zhangs, 3 hours later, and the second Jaeon. It would be great if you died. 3 hours later, Jung saw the thrilling scene shown on the TV screen. With the sudden attack brought about by the arrival of Ivan Vanko, all the attention on the championship has now completely shifted to this attack. In terms of media and attention, how can a tournament with limited attention compare to a match? What about the Playboy attack? Almost every screen that can be played on the TV shows Ivan Vanko whipping Tony Stark's car. The powerful blow not only blocked the car, but also blocked the progress of all cars starting with Stark, and after that, everyone was afraid of death. No one would risk their own lives to try. Where is Vanky's electric cable? The track was almost cleared. The high heat and high energy current ignited the engine oil leaking from Tony Stark's car. Fire and thick smoke covered the entire track. A barrier of flames blocked everyone's sight in the wide track. Ivan Vanky's revenge under the flames begins. Don't we stop him? The second Jaeon pulled his mask, but the face under the mask did not belong to Jaeon, but the appearance of Tony Stark after his appearance was changed. Do you really want to die? You can live a little longer. 3 hours later, Riang said with a shrug. Since the cooperation was reached, the trust problem between the three genes has been solved. However, the other two genes can only repay the greatest regret for the helpless sacrifice of the second gene, even though genes will also be there 3 hours later. After that it dissipates on its own. Waiting for death is a very painful process. Okay. You are waiting for the energy to disappear and die, but I want to let you pierce your heart with a palm. Can you be gentle? The second hot scene described what he would do next as if he was expressing a joke thing to do, but he wasn't as scared as he looked. I will consider it, but there is no need to worry now. It's not time to take away Tony Stark yet. The attention caused by Ivan Vanko is not enough now. Let's wait. 3 hours later, Jaeon suppressed the second Jaeon's restless, even though he himself looked eager to try. But the time now is not yet their show, and Iron Man's armor has not yet appeared, otherwise the value that Tony Stark can embody will not be enough. Speechlessly, Jung pulled his mask lower. In fact, his heart is not as relaxed and comfortable as he shows. No one is not afraid of death. What Jen is afraid of is that his death is worthless, if this is a sacrifice that must be made to return Freya. Second Riang patted the reactor on his chest. It was his last bit of energy protection at this stage, and it was also a promise from Time Zero Riang. The screen returns to the playing field. When the car that was split into two fell to both sides, Tony Stark, who rolled out of the car, also moved a considerable distance away from the car along the trajectory of the car. The head-holding roll in the unobstructed terrain on the track saved Tony Stark's life, and his body was unscathed. But he sprained his ankle. Tony Stark found that he was in big trouble. If it was just a car accident, then everything would be easy, but now what he needs to face is to use his injured foot to escape from the pursuit of the guy in front of him. Your life is so great. The Stark family is blessed by God. Why don't you die now? Slap. With a whip attack, Ivan Vanko saw Tony Stark's escape position and he attacked again. However, Tony Stark never wanted to sit back and die. Although he knew that he would not live long, Tony Stark would rather be poisoned by the radiation of the target element tomorrow than be torn into two halves. Pong. Quickly opening the car door, Tony Stark opened the burning car door next to the separated and destroyed car. Although the heat of the flames ignited his racing jacket, Tony Stark no longer cared about it compared to his own life. This pain. Shoo. Electricity buzzed, and the impact of the door collided with Ivan Vanko's thrust. The rising car door blocked Ivan Vanko's attack but was split into two. Tony Stark could almost feel the high energy impact from him. But there's a thin line. But he held on to his life. Not dead again. Ivan Vanky once again watched Stark collapse in front of him alive. This guy had escaped from his attack twice in an instant. Your life is as stinky and hard as your public attitude. Ivan Vanki was full of praise in his sarcasm. Maybe Tony Stark can be where he is today not entirely because of the shadow of his ancestors. But why? Boom. Ivan Vanko struck again with a whip, and the electric lock hit Tony Stark's body. Swish. Seeing the lightning, Tony Stark quickly moved his hands against the ground and moved backwards. His feet could no longer move freely, and he even needed to use an arm to support him when walking. But now an astonishing burst of energy erupted from the middle of death, the power of. Hey! A spark bloomed, and the electric lock was only half a centimeter away from Tony Stark's legs. A critical moment, phew. The playboy let out a long breath. He seemed to have saved something terrible. Missed again. You need to see an eye doctor, man, said Tony Stark with his back to the last track guardrail. He had no way to avoid it. His current state was almost certain to die, but in the face of a desperate situation, Tony Stark was not like an enemy. The attitude of bowing one's head is still full of humor and irony. 2. As everyone knows, this time, Ivan Vanki's anger has been completely ignited. Since the whip can't hit, then catch him and kill him. Ivan Vanko extends his metal claws to Tony Stark. Hurry up, hurry up. In the Lamborghini, Pepper kept urging the driver Happy to continue accelerating, even though they had jammed dozens of guardrails and damaged a scenic construction site that was still under construction. In order to take a shortcut and use the fastest speed, arriving at the arena at such a fast speed, Happy almost used his best posture ability. The Lamborghini engine with a speed of nearly 160 km per hour makes a more violent sound than the Formula One Formula. The four-wheel drive rubs the ground with hot rubber marks when cornering elegantly. Come on, we're almost there, get ready. Big Fat Happy shouted in the cockpit. He operated the steering wheel with one hand and directed Paybo to open the package he carried with him with the other hand. What do you want me to do? Tony's bag is his most precious thing. Happy pulled out an encrypted box from under the passenger seat and threw it into Paybo's hand. Without waiting for the lady to ask further questions, Happy looked at the area covered in flames in front of him, stepped on the accelerator and accelerated forward again. Boom. Nini is me. Fatty Happy drove the Lamborghini quickly over the track guardrail and accelerated sharply towards Ivan Vanko, who was about to whip Tony Stark again. Although this fat man often looks like he has seen a lot of mismatch, when it comes to doing things, he is also Tony Stark's most trusted person. He drifts into corners quickly and has almost perfect zero angle, and the guardrail on the edge of the track passed by without any trace. Pong! The Lamborghini, which was traveling at over 160 miles per hour, crashed directly into Ivan Vanko's body. Paw! The previously arrogant Avenger Ivan Vanki was now hung on the track guardrail like a piece of rotten meat. The metal iron frame blocked most of the impact. Coupled with the reduced elastic buffering force of the guardrail, Ivan Vanki felt like he was about to vomit from this shock. Tony! Peppa Pig rushed out of the car immediately. In fact, the Lamborghini had not completely stopped at this time, but Peppa could no longer care about it. Tony Stark looked like he was about to die, and his body was covered with blood from scratches, sprains on his ankles and burns all over his body. Tony Stark is so embarrassed now. Hey, I'm not dead yet, be gentle. The man wanted to struggle to leave his girlfriend's arms, but Tony Stark now only felt that all the strength in his body had been drained. He was really exhausted, even if Shang-Pei even Bo's weak body couldn't let him struggle away. You promised me you wouldn't put yourself in danger. But I just want to have a party. Tony Stark wanted to defend himself. He felt that he was ashamed of the woman who loved him so much. He hid everything from her, but she still loved him and followed him as always. You almost killed yourself, you idiot. What will the company do if you die? What will I do? Pebo screamed, hitting Tony Stark on the back hard. The unrestrained fist made Tony Stark feel uncomfortable again. Lucky Tony, who kept complaining, could not stop this deep love for him. However, often at this time there will always be a third annoying guy who comes out to disrupt such a beautiful atmosphere. Man, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but now is really not the time. He's not dead yet. Happy opened the door of the Lamborghini and hesitated to remind his boss and his wife to get in the car. The situation was not very safe yet. Before Happy could finish these words, Ivan Vanki's reply came. Are you happy? It would be better if I let you all die together neatly, right? At this time, the surface of Ivan Vanky's body was covered with large amounts of blood, and the sharp corners and edges of the metal skeleton bruised his skin. However, due to the buffering effect, Ivan Vanky actually did not suffer much damage, except for a slight dizziness. All that was left was a look of embarrassment and an even more angry hatred. Snapped. The electric lock sounded again, and the fierce blow was directly thrown at the rear of the Lamborghini. Boom. With a strong blow, the rear of the Lamborghini was split into two. The entire trunk and the rear wheels were completely separated from the body into a second part. The system in the car that was burning with electric sparks collapsed in an instant. This time Ivan Vanky wanted to make Tony Stark look good. "Give me your bag, give me your bag." At this moment, Tony Stark suddenly burst out with great strength to push himself out of Peebo's embrace, and at the same time blocked his female companion behind him, although Tony Stark could not even stand up. It seemed very forced. But he still shouted to Happy that he needed his package. "It's the bag I asked you to keep. It's the most important thing Tony has." Hearing Tony's cry, Happy asked Peebo for help. Happy had given the safe to Peebo before in the car, but now he didn't know where the lady had put it. "Wherever I go to find your bag, can you say something useful at this time?" Peebo failed to understand the meaning of the exchange between the two men. She just looked particularly flustered and screamed crazily, but this was not true for the current situation. Not helpful at all. It has to be said that the control of the rhythm of the scene that Tony Stark showed next completely reflected the other side of his character. I saw Tony Stark holding Pepper's shoulders tightly, and then said in the town, "I love you, but keep it to me. You are the most important thing. Promise me, and keep it to me soon." Seriously, and sincerely, Tony really needs that portable safe. Swish. The electric lock from Ivan Vanko whipped again. Maybe this guy was dazzled by the impact, or maybe he really needed to see an eye doctor like Tony Stark said. Anyway, this attack missed again. Pooh. At the critical moment, Tony Stark pushed Peebo away and pushed her into the car, while he quickly rolled to a closed position in the same direction. "Oh my God, you're still like this now, and it's really painful to find your position in bed." The big-hearted Tony Stark was very nervous inside, but he looked calm on the outside. While dodging, he laughed at Ivan Vanko's accurate head. "Shut up, bug." Ivan Vanky rolled up his lock whip and grabbed an iron rod beside the track, and then threw it hard towards Tony Stark's position. "You are simply..." Tony bent down again, perfectly avoiding SS. "It's so embarrassing." After completing the dodge, Tony Stark stood up again and laughed. "Shut up, you are just as annoying as what was said on the TV news." Ivan Vanky was ridiculed, and his reason began to be lost as his anger increased. Hatred blinded his eyes, and his fainting brain began to make people angry. His aim plummeted. Now Ivan Vanko looks more like an embarrassed beast attacking the hunter, and Tony Stark's next counterattack can begin soon. "I found it." In a corner under the rear seat of the car, Pepper rummaged through a safe that she thought was useless, and she waved and shouted to Tony Stark. "You see, I am not what I am. People say I am not hypocritical, but then again, brother, you are always catching me." Tony Stark was talking loudly while avoiding Ivan Vanko's attack. He finally saw it clearly. The plasma on Ivan Vanko's face blurred his vision, and the electric locks wrapped around his hands could not allow him to wipe it. Despite these visual obstacles, this is a great opportunity for Tony Stark. Another perfect escape. "You're always holding on to me. Someone hired you, right? If you want money, I'll give you 500 million. Just let me go and pretend this never happened." Tony Stark had actually taken over from Pei as he spoke. The password box Bo threw over there. And the moment he finished speaking, "Jarvis start. RK 3 inches. Click 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 click." The golden and red metal gaps began to fully cover Iron Man's body as he stretched his hands into the safe. In less than 3 seconds, the combination was completed. Ivan Vanko charged up a powerful blow, and Iron Man took action to face the enemy head-on. "Brother, it's time for us to play." 3 hours later, Riang had already activated his Speed Force while speaking. The majestic lightning completely covered his body in an instant. At the same time as the first syllable of the pronunciation of the letter, G gaze, began, Jung had completely entered the overspeed state. Looking at all the content broadcast live on the big screen in front of him, Iron Man's if he plays, then Jung also needs to play. Understood. Second Riang nodded. His speed quickly entered the overspeed state after following 3 hours Riang, almost exactly the same speeding action. Second Riang was like his shadow. No matter from the satellite or no matter what angle you look at from the outside, you will never see any subtle difference between the two. Perfectly synchronized speed, perfectly synchronized movement, perfectly synchronized pace. Boom! A bolt of lightning instantly rushed through the track guardrail and flew towards the middle track where Tony Stark and Ivan Vanko were fighting. On the track, who gave you the reactor? Tony Stark blocked Ivan Vanko's electric lock with a metal partition. From the moment of contact, Tony Stark could tell that the other party's reactor belonged to the same technology as his current one, grade. I originally thought Ivan Vanko was the killer sent by someone, but now Tony Stark wants to know where his reactor comes from. My name is Ivan Vanko, Ivan Vanko roared the moment he came into contact with Tony Stark's armor. The slight distance caused his vision to be blurred, but Tony Stark's initiative this time undoubtedly gave Ivan Vanko an excellent opportunity. Don't hide anymore. Ivan Vanko used the electric lock to firmly absorb Tony Stark's armored gauntlet, making it impossible for him to withdraw. Warning, 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 the armor is interfered with by electrical energy. 20 The body is damaged, the warning is repeated. Inside Tony Stark's armor, the shrill sirens from Jarvis kept coming. Looking for solutions. Immediately, the system could only quickly give Tony Stark's answer. But obviously Ivan Vanko is faster than him. Pong. Repulsive electric energy, also called electric energy interference cannon, is a means of directly attacking the intelligent system under the metal body. When this method is applied to a living body, it is manifested in the paralysis effect of absolute electric shock. Particularly significant. That's a lesson I learned from some asshole once. You're dead, Tony. Ivan Vanko gritted his teeth and removed them. In his hands, the electric lock directly shattered Iron Man's energy muzzle, and the electric lock leaked through the metal gap and began to appear inside Iron Man's body. Body damage exceeds 80%. Warning, SIS The situation was reversed, and the originally evenly matched scene suddenly fell into crisis again due to Tony's carelessness. There was no escape, no avoidance, even the weight of the metal armor directly caused Tony Stark to lose his flexibility, and Jarvis's intelligence was disconnected due to the interfering current, and Tony Stark was finished. Tony. Pei-Bo was cheering for her boyfriend a second ago, but at this moment she felt a twinge in her heart. Tony was finished. This is the thought of countless people watching this scene in front of the TV screen at the same time. Tony Stark is finished. Right at this moment, poof, bang, golden current joins the battlefield. The critical moment. When Ivan Vanko's golden arm blade passed through Tony Stark's armor, the built-in reaction device of the armor was activated, and a powerful energy impact was aimed at Ivan Vanko's chest. But apparently they're not fast enough. At the same moment, Jaeon came on the field. It was almost the moment Ivan Vanko was knocked away after completing his action. In fact, his arm blade had not yet cut through Tony Stark's armor, but it didn't matter. Because of the perspective difference, everyone who sees this scene will think that Tony Stark is dead. Goodbye. 3 hours later, Riang quickly shook his body the moment he approached Iron Man's body. 3 hours later, Riang is from the timeline of 3 o'clock in the morning 5 days ago. In that timeline, Riang's speed is hundreds of times faster than the speed of sound. Before the local speed drops to the normal stage, 3 hours is a remnant of time. As long as Hojian does not overuse the speed force, almost no one can surpass him when he explodes. At least not as far as the current normal timeline is concerned. It was the same even after giving the speed to the second Zhang behind him. 3 hours later, Zhang divided the speed into 3 parts. After the body shook through the Mark III RK-3 armor, a share of the speed force was evenly distributed to the armor. Tony Stark's shock was simultaneously generated, pulling him out of the suit and instantly rushing forward to get off the track. And Diogen then vibrated his body and entered the Mark III armor to gain overall control of the Iron Man armor, but unfortunately, in Jaeon's plan, the second Jaeon needs to be sacrificed. 3 hours later, before leaving, Riang turned around and slapped his hand. The shaking palm instantly penetrated the part that Ivan Vanko had attacked before, and stabbed deeply downwards. The palm that penetrated the metal armor directly hit the third person. Aryang's heart was broken. Goodbye, goodbye. This is a farewell. Second Jaeon's mission is completed. He will attract the attention of the world with his death. Everyone will think that Iron Man Tony Stark is dead, and in Second Jaeon's body, the remaining Speed Force can keep his time remnants alive for at least a full day. A whole day. Enough. You will not die in vain. 3 hours later, Jen's left hand was holding Tony Stark's body, and his right hand was carrying the lightning leather jacket pulled from the second Jen's body. This was the only evidence used to time the dissipation time of the second general. Amid the rushing lightning and wind, the last thing he vaguely heard was a tearful complaint. You promised me to be gentle. We're all assholes. Hurry up. Feeling sad but caring but modified, 3 hours Riang stopped looking behind him after that. After returning with super speed, 3 hours Riang sprinted towards New York across several kilometers in 1 second. Tony. Peppa's eyes were filled with tears. She saw the fall of Iron Man, and that also meant the fall of Tony Stark inside. Although everyone in the world saw the impact that erupted from the chest of the armor at the moment Iron Man was pierced by Ivan Vanki, the strong light of energy covered up the electric light of Riang's running. Everything seemed to have no trace, and no one knew what happened. Has anyone been here? Beside the track, Ivan Vanki, who was completely knocked unconscious by the energy cannon, could no longer stand up, but he saw Iron Man fall at the last moment before he regained consciousness. I succeeded, Dad. Ivan Vanki's eyes also shed tears. The Vanki family succeeded in revenge. That's weird. Run wildly. Boom. Tony Stark, who was still malfunctioning due to current interference in his suit a second ago, now had to consider what kind of trouble he had encountered. Countless electric lights flowed in a strange state in front of Tony Stark's eyes. He could clearly see how fast the man who was running him at this moment was, and countless buildings and scenery were moving behind him. And they are like audiences entering a movie theater, all this wonderful. In addition to the fear of the unknown, there is also the question of what the other party's purpose is. But Tony Stark believes he'll know the answer soon. Pong. At an unknown destination, Tony Stark was thrown to the floor by the runner in yellow leather. What entered his sight was a dark room-like area, surrounded by metal baffles that blocked the light from the outside world. As the only natural light that let in at the exit point was also closed after a lightning movement by the runner in yellow. Click. Light is on. Tony Stark covered his eyes with his hands. The black and white light gap would cause temporary blindness and discomfort, which made Tony Stark feel very uncomfortable. But what makes him even more uncomfortable is obviously what lies behind. Get up, Chu Ba. Riang stepped on the fool's ankle, specifically choosing the injured leg. The one who did it was Riang from 3 hours, and the one who turned on the light was Riang from 0 time. The frequencies of the two hot voices reached a near-perfect agreement, and even if the sound was slowed down at least 1,000 times, there would never be a single subtle difference in a single syllable. The oscillating voice is a bluffing technique used by Jaeon, which will make him look like a devil's advocate under the simultaneous oscillating mask. Hey, this is Black Mass. Tony Stark didn't dare to show weakness. He would not expose himself to absolute weakness, even if it was very likely that it would cause him to be tortured to a great extent. To put it another way, Tony Stark is very suicidal. More terrifying than Black Mass. Pong. At time 0, Riang punched this guy in the face. The powerful punch hit Tony Stark backwards and he lay down on his back. Blood began to ooze from the corners of his eyes. However, before this action is completely completed, let you never forget it. 3 hours later, Jaeon arrived behind Tony Stark at lightning speed and strangled his neck. Bang bang bang. A series of combined punches hit Tony Stark all over his body. At 0, General was using the most violent means to collect his own interest from his enemies. Tony Stark wanted to forgive himself for the sins he had not taken seriously. Sin, and this is just the beginning. The memory is deep combination of punches ended, and the 3 paragraphs were like the beginning of a series of actions with a broken rhythm. It was not until Tony Stark was beaten that he vomited blood and fell into coma, that Riang closed his fists in anger. Tony Stark can't die yet, he still has things that must be completed. After that, Jaeon will decide how long this guy can live based on his own mood. Hurry up. 3 hours later, Riang picked up the yellow suit in his other hand. It belonged to the other self they had sacrificed. The second Jaeon used his time and life to fill the period when Tony Stark was missing. All Jaeon must treat Tony Stark with caution. The world is not as easy to deal with as they imagined. Even he himself can design weapons against himself. And Tony Stark's threat is related to the security of the entire country. Although Jung has made such preparations, they still need a buffer time before that. Shua, lightning speed. At 0 a.m., Riang entered working mode. The experimental platform that had been prepared for several days was ready, and the circuit that was connected to the current began to power the experimental system. The solution in the test tube was also configured, and there was still half a month left to complete it all. Low light. Once again, he entered Tony Stark's sight, and this time he felt quite bad. It was even more uncomfortable than the time he was hijacked in Iraq. Tony Stark felt that his internal organs had been displaced, and his ankle bones were completely twisted. It was hard to imagine why the other party would do such a thing to him. Who instigated you? Tony Stark was very angry, but obviously he hadn't seen the current situation clearly. The other party didn't seem to want to ask him to do anything. You were with him to kill me, so why don't you do it? Tony Stark coughed and roared angrily at the other end, but doing so only made him more uncomfortable. He's awake. 3 hours. Riang stood in the warehouse with nothing to do. What Riang was doing in Century Zero could be done by him who was faster, but 3 hours. Riang, who had seen through the value of his existence, did not. It's not like competing with another person. For a person who is destined to disappear, his meaning is limited. Why waste the value of his existence to compete with another perfect process? If Freya can come back after this time, then she belongs to Zero Riang, not to 3 hours. Although she seems a little unwilling to think about it, 3 hours. Riang still chooses to do this. He should have woken up a long time ago. The two Jeans were having a conversation, and none of them seemed to want to talk to Tony Stark. Ignorance is worse than a beating. In Tony Stark's fragile and sensitive heart, he always longs to be valued by everyone. Someone is him. This is crisis anxiety syndrome. A beating at least proves that he has the value of hatred in the eyes of the other party. It needs to be retaliated. Being noticed means that you can get clues and create opportunities. But if there is no contact, then knowing nothing is what makes people most angry and hesitant. You kidnapped me. Do you do it for money or something else? How about I agree? Tony Stark dragged his injured leg forward and crawled forward. The originally decent game suit was in dilapidated condition after being burned. Now stained with rust stains and dirt chips on the ground, Tony Stark feels like he has returned to Iraq. At least someone will talk to me and don't make me feel lonely, guys. Tony Stark began to test a little bit, strengthening the tone and adjectives to test some reactions that the other party would give him. Apparently, Tony Stark is a very smart man. It seems that he didn't do anything to you. 3 hour. Riang can't find what he needs to accomplish currently while doing nothing. The value of his existence is to deal with the crisis that may arise in the experiment. 3 hour. Riang in the super strong state is the safety left by Zero Riang to himself. Sure. So he stayed out of these activities. This guy started his first official conversation with Tony Stark. You just mean promise me literally. Tony Stark made a very strange expression. Perhaps it was the ambiguous part of his previous sentence that attracted the other party's attention, just like some dirty jokes can also make the other party pay attention. A serious person laughs, even though it is dirty. Your cynical look makes people extremely annoying every time. 3 hours ago, he pinched Tony Stark's hair and looked at his face and said disdainfully. This guy makes everything look like it doesn't matter. But is it this contempt or randomness that has caused countless destructions? They all say that I have a perfect personality and a straightforward person. Cynicism is my most proud label. Tony Stark forced an ugly smile in front of him, while he was thinking in his heart how to continue this sentence. Hey, do you want money? Tony Stark suddenly changed the subject and asked. This made Sanshireang stunned. It seemed that this guy had never seen the current situation clearly. Maybe there was some error in his judgment. How much can you give us? Let me go 1,000 million to the guy named Venki before I gave him 500 million, you too. But Tony Stark wasn't done yet. Pong! A fist hit him in the face. The most valuable thing about you is not your money. It's better to keep your life. Continuing to anger us will only make you die faster. Man, I'm keeping you now because your value has not yet been reflected. Don't make us wait too long. 3 hours later, Riang stepped on his face and said condescendingly. This filled Tony Stark's heart with humiliation. He never thought about whether he would have the intention to kill someone. Tony Stark wanted to kill the guy in front of him, which completely tore apart their dignity and pretense, guy. But equally, 3 hours of hot words also awakened Tony Stark. The reactor you are aiming for is the arc reactor. You're not stupid enough yet. 3 hours later, Jung took off his hood and stood in front of Tony Stark. Do you remember this face? Do you remember who I am? You made me everything I am now. Your ignorance and arrogance ruined my life. You always put money on the surface. Will you understand the heavy blow I have suffered? You're worth or die. 3-hour Jaeon grabbed one hand on Tony Stark's collar, while the other hand extended back and pointed at 0-hour Jaeon. At the same time, Zero also took off his mask. Are you surprised, Playboy? Zero stood in front of Tony Stark for 3 hours. Oh my god. Oh my god. Tony Stark had never thought about or seen such a thing until he heard all their plans, because Zero's work had been completed, and now it was Tony Stark's turn to cooperate, but the answer also determined Tony Stark's retreat. When everyone in the world thinks you are dead, no one will save value for your existence. 3 hours later, Jaeon revealed Tony Stark's last little thought of escaping, and he must forgive himself for his mistakes. Time cannot change the future from the present. If you create an afterimage of your past self, what will happen to your present future? From an academic point of view, what Tony Stark should be concerned about now is really not what he should be. It's this kind of thing. But this guy's out-of-the-box brain circuit also strangely caused such a problem. It was like a strange closed loop. More importantly, what did you use to generate such a huge power supply here? But obviously, Jaeon didn't have any patience to answer any of his questions, and neither Jaeon wanted to. To shut up, they said at the same time. But Tony Stark, who thought he had found the opportunity, was still talking endlessly. His topic seemed to open from here. He eagerly wanted to create an opportunity for himself to have a fair conversation. Standing at the same level can only create value for yourself. Only by being valuable can you have a greater chance of survival. It's an amazing idea to repeat experiments, but have you ever considered the issue of accurate calculations, energy supply issues and time environment issues? Let me go. I have the best laboratory in the world, with a lot of 1,000 million. Just let me go. Quote. Roll. At time 0, Riang grabbed Tony Stark's neck and directly stopped his next words. He was over 1 meter tall and directly grabbed Tony Stark and lifted him up. Tony Stark, who was both off the ground, began to struggle. He struggled, but the difficulty in breathing prevented him from saying anything. With Riang's furious expression, he was afraid that he would completely break this fool's neck with just a little force. I might as well tell you that I really want you to die, but you must live now to show me your only value. This is the last experiment. I am at the end of my rope. Put away your nonsense and don't try to anger me again. Success. You live, if you fail, you die. Pong. Jaeon threw Tony Stark to the ground. The feeling of breathing fresh air again made Tony Stark feel that he was still alive. He began to face the devil-like guy in front of him. It was hard to imagine that the other person was one of his employees half a year ago. Although Tony Stark was there, he is particularly indifferent to the management of the company. But he can at least know through some high-level returns what outstanding talents are engaged in scientific research in the company. By chance, Jean was one of the people in Tony Stark's memory. Jaeon has a good personality, is gentle with others, works seriously, and studies diligently. He is almost a perfect template for employees and researchers. But now he's like this. He wants his life. You'd better answer me. You understand? Yes, yes. This time, Tony Stark no longer tried to be clever. He understood the heart of a desperate person. A true fanatic would not hesitate or care about other things. Especially for a particularly rigorous person, Tony Stark must use another mentality to face the immediate danger. The Playboy has always believed that money can buy everything he wants in the world, but this time experience taught him that money cannot buy his life. What do you need from me? Tony Stark decided to accept his fate and accept the other party's arrangement, but perhaps his conscience was condemning himself. Although he wanted to kill these two guys after this, reality must make him change. Complete the experiment you conducted 3 or 6 months ago, and the situation will be exactly the same as that of the power outage. I need my AI to cooperate. We have real-time monitoring of artificial intelligence and it is online. Zhang's voice control was activated, and the smart terminal was immediately moved into the warehouse room and came online. Very good design. Tony Stark's eyes suddenly lit up. From the control panel and part of the program design that appeared on the projection screen, Tony Stark could tell the difference between good and bad at a glance. Jean was a truly outstanding researcher. What doubts do you have now? I need enough materials and there is something wrong with your design. Tony Stark was brought to the experimental bench by 3 hours. Simple and practical infrastructure was available one by one, but there was no comprehensive intelligent control and design part. Everything here needs to be done manually, and the role of the intelligent program is limited. In addition to calculating the rationing volume and parameters, it cannot provide all the coordination as perfectly as in Tony Stark's home. After all, real-time monitoring is not Tony's Stark's Jarvis. Barely enough, Tony Stark said to himself. He was glad that at least this was not the former Iraqi base, and at least there were things that could be seen as modern here, but 3 months ago, it was simply like in primitive times. Can we start? Jung looked particularly impatient. While he was worried that Tony Stark would play tricks in the reactor, he also needed to consider whether the results of doing so would be able to reproduce everything that happened 6 months ago. Sejayon always wants to do things perfectly. But this subtle impatience is captured by Tony Stark, who racks his brains to create every opportunity for himself. There are problems in the design of your reactor, especially the wiring problem. Excessive pursuit of output power will also lead to imperfections in the power supply part, which will cause the system to directly collapse when it receives too much energy. Tony Stark has a keen eye. Jean ordered the problem of the reactor originally designed by Ivan Vanko. Tony Stark had already completely analyzed the final result just by seeing the structure. It was obvious that he made the same mistake as Ivan Vanko. Mistake, what Jaeon needed was not his comment on its design. What you need to do is not to reenact the power outage accident for me, redesign the reactor, and use the materials here, Jean said irritably. But Tony Stark's answer was more anxious. Are you crazy? He roared angrily. The mechanism of the reactor is extremely unstable. Forcing secondary use with an imperfect design is very likely to lead to very unstable things. There are worse things than me. 3 hours ago, Riang raised his arm that might disappear at any time in the concussive state. Every time he used his speed force, he would shrink a little, until it finally disappeared completely. It can be said that the concept of time residue is unique to Jung in this world. There is no such inference even in the scientific community. Scientific theory stays in the debate about the grandmother's paradox, while practical science calls the Stark family to be the technology tree is biased toward cold fusion miniaturized reactors. Jaeon's time remnants have proved with facts that this is another new idea, but for now, this is all a matter of later events for Tony Stark. What he needs to focus on now is just how he can survive these two strict. It's like getting back alive in the hands of a madman. The unstable construction will cause the input current to produce unpredictable results when entering the reactor. The worst-case scenario may be a nuclear explosion. Do you understand what this means? Tony Stark yelled at the top of his lungs, trying to explain this matter, describe the severity. But it was obvious that he overacted and used too much force, which made the disguise look fake. And most importantly, the two guys in front of him didn't seem to pay attention to it at all. It means we can escape, and then you are dead, right? 3 hours. Riang shook his arm in boredom. He was really panicking. To be honest, 3 hours. Riang began to doubt that Zero Riang was going to kill him. Why pull out the timeline? It seems that the value of one's own existence is not reflected in this process. So what's the meaning? Tony Stark's answer to this guy was speechless. The diffusion speed of a nuclear explosion exceeds 200 kilometers per second, and the radiation speed can reach a speed of more than 2,000 kilometers immediately after the nuclear explosion occurs. But this premise is that everything happened immediately after the nuclear explosion occurred. Judging from the speed of these two Riang, they could run to a safe place after the nuclear explosion. Anyway, Riang was alone. Don't care about anything anymore. The mistake in the nuclear explosion was caused by Tony Stark, and he didn't even feel guilty. I would like to ask, for a person who doesn't pay attention to anything, what can you use to argue or persuade him? Start as soon as you figure it out. Don't waste our time, Sanshi Riang began to urge impatiently. However, Tony Stark still did not admit defeat. He finally asked before starting work, "One last thing, why do you always care about time so much?" "Shut up," the two men said at the same time. On the other side, it is connected to the central Kama Taj shrine in Nepal in the New York Temple Hall. A twisted light wheel spread out in an instant, and a hole opened out of the folded space from the light wheel. It was like a part of the space was torn apart and suddenly appeared here. The other end of the space is another corner of the earth. The bald woman wearing a long gown stepped out of the hole, and Master Ancient One once again came to the land of New York. The Ancient One Master Daniel, the bald woman returned the favor to the New York Temple defender who bowed to her. As the highest status person of Kama Taj, Ancient One has the right and ability to go anywhere at any time, but this time his purpose is called people or worth considering. Is there something wrong with time again? I felt an abnormality in the time ripples from Morocco at Kamal Taj, but my magic guided me that the core of the abnormality came from New York, so I need to come and see Master Daniel. Is there anything abnormal in New York recently? Grandmaster Ji Yuyi asked the question calmly, as if she didn't care about everything, but in fact she paid special attention to everything she cared about. There has been no abnormality in the temple recently. The Master of Prophecy has found no signs of black magic from the outside world. There are no magical abnormalities in New York. Master Daniel is not sure what the Ancient One is referring to, but he has fulfilled his duty to magically monitor and protect New York. The wars and destruction among mortals have nothing to do with Kama Taj, so these magicians they don't care about the trivial matters of mortals. What they care about are things from another world that will change the entire world. You did a good job. Master Ancient One didn't get the news she wanted. In fact, she wanted to ask if there were some trivial matters in New York, especially things related to the guy with super speed, but from beginning to end, Ancient One never told Zhang. She had shared her existence with other mages, so she finally decided to hide it. Ji Yuyi has always chosen to fight the unknown things by herself. She doesn't care how much pressure is on her shoulders. All she cares about is whether she can protect the whole world. I'll go out for a walk, and you continue to guard the temple. Ji Yuyi said. Yes, on the streets of New York, Ji Yuyi changed out of her gown. The yellow hoodie under her gown covered her bald head. With a delicate and beautiful face, she put on a pair of modern headphones and shook a pair of earphones in her hand. The beauty of small folding fans is difficult to express with any clear description. She has the elegance and stability of ancient people, as well as her ancient and modern understanding of the world and her own persistence and pursuit. She will integrate herself into the world during her relaxed moments. Under the nourishment of the time gem, no matter how many years Ji Yuyi has, she always looks like a young girl in her 20s, but in fact she is an old monster that is over 1,000 years old. When Ji Yuyi is walking on the street, apart from the travelers who accidentally stop and discover this glimpse of beauty, no one is surprised about where she comes from. Ji Yuyi always looks like he is quietly burying everything deep in his heart. Magic teach her to stand out from the crowd and be forgotten quickly. Like a rose born from the root of the wall, it is surprising and stunning. New York, you always give me countless surprises. Ji Yuyi looked at the tallest and most iconic building outside Times Square in New York. This is New York, and it is also the beginning of countless futures. Ji Yuyi stepped through a certain space node. This time, even the magic mark was not released. The instant mirror space instantly made Ji Yuyi enter the reverse latitude outside the environment, and the space magic took her directly to New York, outside Hong Kong. Time eraser, Ancient One is here again, and she once again found the location of Riang. The power system is stable, the room temperature is stable, the humidity is stable, and the pressure device is activated. The experiment in the warehouse has entered the formal stage. With the assistance of real-time monitoring of smart terminals, the monitoring of all third-factor parameters accurately replicated the blackout that occurred that night. This time with the help of Tony Stark, Jaeon's experiment went particularly smoothly. Although he very much hates this playboy who ruined everything for him, and Tony Stark also wants to kill these two fools who crushed him, but it must be admitted that Tony Stark plays a very important role in his role as a hero. At this point, he is qualified. When he knew the mistake he had made, and it did not involve his own interests, the first thing Tony Stark thought of was not revenge and destruction, but to make up for his mistakes with heart. Perhaps Tony Stark would launch a plan afterward. All his abilities are aimed at Jung, but now they have a cooperative relationship. I'm ready here, your computer is very good. Tony Stark was full of praise for the accuracy of real-time monitoring. Although the facilities here are simple and require more effort, the existence of real-time monitoring made him at one point, I thought this was at my own home, and the real-time monitoring was from Jarvis at home. My side too. Boom. There was a shaking outside the warehouse, as if something had happened. Immediately, the alarm device in the warehouse began to sound continuously. Warning, 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 warning. Due to the imperfect facilities, Jaeon did not further classify the warnings, so they had to manually check the problem this time. Fortunately, the external surveillance screen quickly gave them an answer. A woman appeared on the screen, a bald and beautiful woman who looked like she was dressed at the end of the last century. It's her again, the two hotties said in unison. For the two Jeans, they both experienced the timeline of the deliberate confrontation at the same time. The impression that Ancient One left on Jean was undoubtedly profound. This was a very troublesome and very powerful woman, her origins were unknown and her identity was unknown. Unknown, with unknown intentions, was the identity tag given to her by Riang. So what is her purpose this time? No matter why she came here again, she must not be allowed to interfere with the progress of the experiment, Zero Gen counted. Hey, your old lover is here to cause trouble. Tony Stark is as mean as ever. He never hesitates to ridicule those guys who are interested in him, but to be honest, Tony Stark is now with two hotties. The conflict between Aang and Aang is no longer as sharp as it was at the beginning. Shut up. How could the two Riangs reach such an amazing tacit understanding? After this, no one talked to Tony Stark again. 3 hours later, Riang said, I'll hold her back while you speed up and continue the experiment. Lightning erupted around 3 hours Riang's body. In theory, 3 hours Riang, who has 100 times the speed of sound, really has the possibility to challenge the Ancient One. After all, Riang under normal conditions can break the barrier of the mirror world, so in the super speed state Zhang is fully capable of knocking down Ji Yuyi. Of course, this is just a guess. But Zero Time Heat doesn't think so. He now believes that his other self will not betray him at the critical time, but the first thing to confirm is that the 3 hours of heat are still that long. Zero Time Heat Aang wasn't sure if Aang could last that long after 3 hours. Your speed can be kept here to cope with all emergencies. Accidents during the experiment may happen at any time. If you use it against that woman, you may disappear. At time 0, the last syllable of Zhang was very small, but very serious. He said something that both Zhang must pay attention to. In 3 hours, Zhang's speed power reserve was running low. The daily life of the whole 5 days consuming enough to drain all of his energy reserves. But judging from 3 hours Riang himself, he didn't seem to care about this. What Freya wants to see is a perfect me. If I stay here, my meaning cannot be truly reflected. If disappearing can allow me to show my due value, then this is my only meaning now. You said in the experiment if accidents happen, then that woman is the biggest accident we have encountered now. 3 hours ago, Jaeon's words almost showed his true meaning. Unlike the second Jaeon, he did not make the intention to choose self-sacrifice. Perhaps he was touched by his other self. If Freya can do this experiment, if he returns, then what will he do to face the return of his fiancée if he has so little time and can disappear at any time? Cough. It was a sensational and difficult to choose moment. The cough that ruined the atmosphere was Stark. I said, who can tell me what you are talking about? What is there to argue about? Tony Stark said playfully. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.